She built his empire from nothing. Spent 8 years turning his failing startup into Korea's most powerful tech conglomerate. She had the vision, the strategy, the sacrifices. He had one meeting without her. And walked out having sold everything. Including her. To the highest bidder. She had 48 hours to leave the country. She had no idea that the man who bought her contract was the one person in Korea who could burn it all down. Neither did her husband. Zara Mensah had a rule about hotel lobbies. Never stop moving in them. Lobby chairs were for people waiting to be somewhere else, and Zara was always exactly where she intended to be. She passed through spaces like that with purpose, her laptop bag over one shoulder, her mind 3 steps ahead of her body, already in the meeting, already past it, already thinking about what came next. That Tuesday morning in November she broke her own rule. She stopped. Because the television mounted above the lobby bar of the Lotte Hotel was showing a press conference she had never been told about. Nexus Technology. Seoul's fastest growing tech. The company she had spent 8 years of her life building from a failing 3-person startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. The company whose quarterly strategy report she had been awake until 2 a.m. completing the night before at her husband's specific request. Her husband was on the screen right now. Kwon Tae-young stood at a podium flanked by men in expensive suits she didn't recognize, his smile doing the thing it always did in rooms, making everyone feel like they were part of something historic. He was announcing the acquisition of Nexus by Yongwei Digital, one of China's largest technology conglomerates, in a deal valued at $3 billion. Zara stood in the middle of the Lotte Hotel lobby with her laptop bag on her shoulder and watched her husband sell their company on live television. She hadn't known. She found out the same way a stranger would. Standing in a hotel lobby at 8:47 in the morning watching it on a screen above a bar. The woman behind the concierge desk said something. Zara didn't hear it. A businessman walked past and his shoulder clipped her laptop bag and he apologized and she didn't register that either. She watched Tae-young answer questions from journalists with the comfortable fluency of a man who had been preparing for this moment for a long time. She watched Chairman Kwon, her father-in-law, standing to the side with an expression she recognized now as satisfaction he was trying to contain. She watched a journalist ask about the leadership structure of the post-acquisition company. She watched Tae-young smile. Nexus will operate under entirely new leadership going forward. This acquisition represents a fresh chapter. A clean slate. Clean slate? Zara's hand tightened on her laptop bag strap. 8 years. She had given this company 8 years of her life. She had written the original business plan on a Tuesday night when Tae-young came home with a failing startup and a dream he didn't know how to build. She had restructured the entire operational model in year 2 when they were 3 months from bankruptcy. She had identified the AI integration strategy that tripled their valuation in year 4. She had managed for product launches, 2 international expansions, and 1 hostile takeover attempt that she had dismantled so elegantly that the aggressor ended up investing in them instead. Clean slate. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Mensah. My name is Attorney Lim Junho, legal counsel for Yongwei Digital's Korean acquisition team. As per the terms of the Nexus acquisition agreement signed yesterday, we need to arrange a meeting at your earliest convenience to discuss the transition of your employment contract and the associated terms therein. Please contact our office today. Time is of the essence. Zara read the message twice. Then she sat down in one of the lobby chairs she never sat in, placed her laptop bag carefully on the floor beside her, and read it a 3rd time. The terms therein. She was in the contract. Not as a leader. Not as a co-founder. As a term. She didn't call Attorney Lim. She called Tae-young. He answered on the 4th ring with the particular careful brightness of someone who had been waiting for this call and had prepared for it. Zara, he called. When? Just that word. Can we do this at home? I'll explain everything properly at home and you'll understand why. When did you sign it? Monday, he said. Monday. Yesterday. while she was finishing the quarterly strategy report he had specifically asked her to complete. While she was working on the company he was selling. He had asked her to do that work so she would be busy and not notice. "Tai-young," Zara called. Her voice was very even. She had her mother's ability to go completely still when something devastating happened. The Ghanaian side of her that understood sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to perform your own pain for an audience. "What exactly does my contract say?" She heard him exhale. "There's a non-compete clause. Standard for acquisitions of this size. You can't work in Korean tech, any company, any capacity, for 5 years. And there's a residency requirement. You need to transition out of Korea within 48 hours of the agreement execution." The lobby was moving around her. People coming and going, indifferent and purposeful. "You're telling me that you sold a contract that requires me to leave the country in 48 hours. Zara, the valuation. Did you negotiate that clause? The buyers required. Did you negotiate it, Tai-young? Did you push back? Did you tell them that your wife, your co-founder, the person who built the company they were buying, was not a term in an acquisition agreement? Did you say that? I thought you would understand. $3 billion, Zara. Our future is your future, not mine." She ended the call. She sat in the lobby chair for exactly 4 more minutes. Long enough to feel the full weight of what had just happened. Long enough to let it land completely rather than deflect it. 8 years. A marriage, a company, and a life she had built with her own hands and her own mind and her own sacrifices. Gone in a 48-hour clause her husband hadn't bothered to negotiate. Then she picked up her laptop bag, stood up, and called Attorney Lim. "This is Zara Mensah. I'd like to meet this afternoon. I have some questions about the contract." "Of course, Ms. Mensah. I should let you know that one of Zhongwei's Korean acquisition partners, Mr. Seo Junho, has specifically requested to be present at this meeting." "Fine, send me the address." She walked out of the Lotte Hotel into the cold Seoul morning with her head up and her jaw set and her mind already working. She had 48 hours. She had absolutely no intention of using them to pack. The meeting was in Uedo, the financial district. A glass tower that housed Seo Junho's private equity firm, SJ Capital, on its top 4 floors. Zara had heard of Seo Junho. Everyone in Korean business had heard of Seo Junho. He was the kind of figure who existed in the industry the way weather existed, as an environmental condition rather than a person. Something you accounted for, planned around, respected the destructive potential of. 40 years old. Built SJ Capital from nothing at 26. Had an instinct for undervalued assets that bordered on supernatural. Had never made a significant investment error in 14 years of operation. Was rumored to be so analytically cold that his own legal team referred to him privately as the machine. Zara had never met him. She took the elevator to the 38th floor, gave her name to a receptionist who clearly recognized it, and was shown into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. She was early. She sat with her back to the windows and her laptop open and spent 12 minutes reviewing everything she knew about Zhongwei Digital's acquisition history before the door opened. Seo Junho walked in alone. She had expected a retinue. Lawyers, assistants, the performative apparatus of power. He brought none of it. He was taller than she'd imagined from photographs. Lean, precisely dressed, dark hair without a strand out of place. He had a face that gave away absolutely nothing, carved into professional neutrality so thoroughly it had probably forgotten any other expression. His eyes were different though. Sharp. Taking everything in. Landing on her with an assessment so thorough and unhurried that a less grounded person would have found it destabilizing. Zara met his gaze without blinking. He pulled out the chair directly across from her and Saturday. "Ms. Mensah, I appreciate you meeting on short notice. Mr. Seo, before your attorney arrives, I want to ask you something directly." Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not surprise exactly. Recalibration. Go ahead, he said. Did you read my file before you agreed to acquire my contract? Yes, he said. Then you know what I built at Nexus. I know what Nexus became, he said carefully. I have my own views on the causality. Meaning that I have been watching Nexus for 3 years. And in those 3 years I have been consistently struck by a discrepancy between the public face of the company and its actual intellectual architecture. Your husband is excellent at presenting ideas. You are excellent at having them. Those are not the same skill, and the market has been conflating them for 8 years. You bought my contract because you knew. I bought your contract because Joneway is paying $3 billion for a company, and I needed to understand what they were actually buying. And what I found was that the most valuable thing in Nexus was not its technology portfolio or its market position or its brand. His eyes didn't leave hers. It was you. And you were not included in the acquisition. So you included me yourself. I acquired your contract, yes. Which means for the duration of your non-compete period you work exclusively with SJ Capital. And if I refuse, the non-compete stands regardless. You simply spend 5 years not working instead of working. I'm offering you the only option that uses your abilities rather than wastes them. What exactly would I be doing for SJ Capital? She asked. Whatever you decide is worth doing. I don't hire people to follow instructions. I hire people who see things others miss. You've been doing that for 8 years for someone who didn't deserve it. I'd like to see what you do when you're working for yourself. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you, he replied. And something in the way he said it suggested he meant it as more than a professional observation, then caught himself and filed it away behind the neutrality. Attorney Lim arrived then, apologizing for his lateness, filling the room with papers and procedural language. Zara answered every question precisely. Signed what needed signing. Asked for copies of everything. But her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere in the space between what Junho had said and what it meant. The most valuable thing in Nexus was you. 8 years of being the invisible architecture of someone else's dream. 8 years of watching Tai Lang take bows for work she had done. 8 years of Chairman Kwon looking through her at family dinners like she was furniture his son had inexplicably brought home. And this man, this stranger, had looked at 3 years of data and seen the truth in 48 hours. She thought about that on the elevator down. About what it meant to be finally, clearly, accurately seen. She thought about it all the way home to the apartment she had 48 hours to vacate. She walked through the door to find Tai Lang sitting in the living room. He stood when she came in, his expression a mixture of guilt and the particular defensive posture of someone who had already constructed their justifications. Zara, let me explain properly. Sit down, Tai Yang. He Saturday. She remained standing. She looked around the apartment. The artwork she had chosen. The bookshelves she had built. The kitchen she had redesigned. 8 years of her taste and her decisions and her presence making this space into something worth living in. I'm not leaving in 48 hours, she said. Zara, the contract. I have retained independent legal counsel and I will be reviewing every clause of that contract with my own attorneys, she said. I am also retaining a forensic accountant to review 8 years of Nexus financial records in which I had co-founder status and no co-founder compensation structure. Taeyang's face changed. What are you doing? He asked. What I should have done years ago, Zara answered. Paying attention to the numbers. She picked up her laptop bag from where she'd set it by the door. I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. When I come back tomorrow I expect you and your father to be available for a conversation. She looked at him. At this man she had loved and believed in and given the best years of her professional life to. I built that company, Tai Yang. Every strategy. Every pivot. Every decision that turned 3 failing people in a rented office into $3 billion. And I will not disappear quietly because you and your father decided I was inconvenient. Zara, tell your father that I said hello. She walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click that was somehow more devastating than a slam. In the elevator going down, she pulled out her phone and sent one text. To a number she had been given 2 hours ago in a conference room overlooking the Han River. Mr. Seo, I have some questions about what you found when you were watching Nexus for 3 years. I think we need a longer conversation. Are you available tomorrow morning? The reply came in 40 seconds. Yes. 8 a.m., same room. I'll have coffee. Zara looked at the message for a moment. Then, for the first time since she had stood in a hotel lobby watching her life be sold on television, she almost smiled. She was declared sold on a Monday. She was just getting started. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell us where you are. Because this story is only just beginning, and trust me, you have absolutely no idea where it goes. Subscribe to Novatales TV right now. Let's keep going. Here we go. Seo Junho was already in the conference room when Zara arrived at 7:58 a.m. 2 coffees on the table. Black for her. She hadn't told him that either. She sat down across from him, pulled out her laptop, and looked at him directly. You've been watching Nexus for 3 years, what exactly did you see? Junho wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. A small human gesture that sat oddly on someone so controlled. I saw a company whose public strategy and internal execution never quite matched. Kwon Tae-lyung interviews brilliantly. His magnetic in rooms. But every time he described Nexus's strategic direction publicly, there was a precision to it that didn't match his communication style in other contexts. You noticed the language, Zara said. I noticed the thinking, Junho corrected. The way Nexus made decisions. The timing. The particular kind of patience in the pivots. Someone inside that company thinks in systems. Long-connected systems. Tae-young thinks in moments. He looked at her. It took me about 6 months to understand it was you. Zara was quiet for a moment. What did you do with that understanding? I waited, Junho said simply. I wanted to see how long it would take for the situation to become untenable. For the gap between who was doing the work and who was getting the credit to crack something open. 3 years, Zara said. You're more patient than I expected, not a criticism but an observation. I loved him, the past tense arrived naturally, without drama. People are patient with things they love even when they shouldn't be. Junho looked at her steadily. Something moved behind his eyes and settled. Yes, they are. The room held that for a moment. Then Zara opened her laptop. I want to show you something I found last night. She had not slept. After leaving the apartment she had checked into a hotel in Mapo district, ordered room service she didn't eat, and spent 11 hours going through every Nexus document she still had access to before her credentials were terminated at midnight. She had been looking for the financial irregularities she'd sensed for months but never pursued because she had trusted Tae-young, and trust made you look away from things you shouldn't. She had found something much worse. These are Nexus's international partnership agreements from the last 4 years, she said, turning her laptop toward Junho. Specifically the technology licensing agreements with 3 Southeast Asian governments and 2 European research institutions. On the surface they're standard, technology transfer agreements. Nexus licenses its AI infrastructure software to foreign governments and institutions for a fee. Clean, legal and documented. On the surface, Junho repeated. Look at the data access clauses, specifically Clause 7C in each agreement. Junho read. His expression didn't change but something in his posture shifted. Almost imperceptibly. They're not just licensing the software, no, Clause 7C grants Nexus ongoing access to the operational data generated by the licensed software in the partner institutions. Government databases. Research networks. Infrastructure systems. That's not unusual for software agreements. Diagnostic access, performance monitoring. The volume isn't, but the destination is. She clicked to the next screen. I traced the data routing last night. The operational data being collected under Clause 7C isn't going to Nexus servers. It's being routed through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands directly to a private server network I've traced to 3 locations. She looked at him. 1 in Shanghai. 1 in Beijing. And 1 in a building in Uedo that I'm fairly certain is connected to a Korean government ministry. The conference room was completely silent. Junho sat back slowly. You're describing industrial espionage, he said. At minimum, at maximum I'm describing a coordinated intelligence operation using a Korean tech company as infrastructure. And I'm describing it to you at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday because the company that was running this operation was just acquired by Zhongwei Digital, a Chinese conglomerate. Junho was very still. Zhongwei didn't just buy a tech company, they bought the pipeline, Zara said. Whatever was being collected and wherever it was going, Zhongwei now owns the mechanism. Does Taiyang know? Junho asked. Zara thought about her husband. About his particular combination of ambition and incuriosity. About the way he had always been happy to let her handle the details while he managed the narrative. I don't think so, but I think his father does. Junho stood up. Moved to the window. Stood with his back to her looking out over the Han River for a long moment. When he turned back his expression was different. Still controlled. But with an urgency underneath the control that hadn't been there before. How certain are you about the data routing? He asked. Certain enough to have documented every step. I'm a strategic consultant. I don't present conclusions I can't support. Who else has seen this? No one. It needs to stay that way, Junho said, until we understand the full shape of it. If Chairman Kwon knows you found this and you're still in Seoul, he stopped. He'll do what? Zara asked. Junho looked at her directly. He'll make sure you stop being a problem. The words landed with quiet weight. Zara thought about Chairman Kwon's face at family dinners. The particular cold patience of him. The way he had always looked at her like a miscalculation his son had made that would eventually be corrected. He already tried to make me disappear, he just used a contract instead of anything more direct. A contract is considerably more deniable, what you found changes the calculus. He crossed back to the table. Sat down. Looked at her with the focused intensity of someone making a significant decision. I want to make you a different offer than the one on the table, he said. I'm listening. Not a contract position. A partnership? You bring me everything you found and everything you can still find. I bring the resources to investigate it properly, legal, financial, intelligence. We build a complete picture of what Chairman Kwon has been running through Nexus. And then we decide together what to do with it. Why together? You could take what I've given you right now and run the investigation yourself. Because it's your company, Junho said. Your 8 years. Your discovery. Because the people who erased you from your own story don't get to write the ending. You do. Zara looked at him across the table. This man who had watched from a distance for 3 years and seen what everyone else had missed. Who had walked into a negotiation prepared to offer her employment and instead offered her authorship. There's one more thing I want. Tell me, Junho said. I want to build something new. Not reclaim Nexus. Something that makes Nexus irrelevant. She held his gaze. I've been thinking about it for 3 years. In the margins of everything I was doing for Taiyang. Because I always knew on some level that the company I was building wasn't mine. What is it? Junho asked. Zara turned her laptop around. On the screen was a business plan. Detailed, structured, breathtaking in its scope. An AI infrastructure company built on an entirely new architectural model that made everything Nexus had done look like a first draft. Junho read it in silence. When he looked up, his expression had done something she hadn't seen it do before. Something that wasn't quite neutrality anymore. You've been carrying this for 3 years, he said. I needed the right moment. And the right resources. And the right partner? Junho asked. That too, Zara said. The Han River glittered outside the windows. Seoul moved around them indifferent and purposeful. And in a conference room on the 38th floor of a Uedo tower, two people looked at each other across a table covered in documents and made the kind of decision that changes the direction of everything. What do you want to call it? Junho asked. Origin, Zara replied. Over the following 3 weeks, Zara moved into a rhythm she hadn't known since the early days of Nexus, when everything was possible and nothing was yet complicated by success. She worked from SJ Capital's offices, a space Junho cleared for her on the 37th floor with its own team of analysts, a legal department at her disposal, and access to SJ Capital's intelligence network, which was considerably more extensive than anything available to a standard private equity firm. Junho had built more than an investment company. Zara understood that within the first week. SJ Capital was an information architecture. A network of relationships, data sources, and analytical capability that gave Junho a view of the Korean business landscape that was several layers deeper than anything publicly available. She used every bit of it. The investigation into Chairman Kwon's parallel operation expanded kwikly once she had proper resources behind it. What she had found in the Nexus licensing agreements was the visible edge of something that went much deeper. Chairman Kwon has been building this for 9 years, she told Junho one evening. They were in his office, documents covering every surface, takeout containers pushed to one side. They had developed a habit of working through dinner without planning to. It started before Nexus was successful. Before anyone was paying attention. The shell company in the Kaimans, studying the financial map she'd constructed. Front for a data brokerage operation, he's been selling Korean technology sector intelligence to foreign buyers for nearly a decade. Government contractors. Defense-adjacent companies. And more recently, directly to Chinese state-connected entities. Through Nexus's international partnerships. Nexus gave him legitimate access to foreign institutional networks. That's why he needed the company to succeed. Not for the money. For the access. She looked up. That's why he needed me. He needed Nexus to actually work so the partnerships would be credible. He used you, Junho said. His voice was even, but there was something underneath it. He used all of us, Taeyong included. Though I think Taeyong knew more than he admitted. The acquisition. Selling to Zhongwei. Transfers the entire infrastructure to Chinese ownership. Whatever Chairman Kwon built inside Nexus, Zhongwei now has direct access to it. That's not a coincidence. That's the endgame. Junho stood up, moved to the window. The Korean government connection, the server location in Uedo. I've identified the ministry, it's the Ministry of Science and Technology. Specifically a deputy minister named Oh Sang-woo, who has been on 3 of the same international conference panels as Chairman Kwon over the last 6 years. If a deputy minister is involved, this is a national security matter. Yes, Zara said. Which means we can't go to Korean authorities directly. Not without risking interception, we need to go international first. Same logic as going around Minute Pharma. Junho turned from the window. Looked at her. You sound like you've done this before, he said. I think clearly under pressure. It's possibly my least charming quality. Something crossed his face. Quick and warm and immediately contained. It's not, then turned back to the documents. Zara watched him for a moment. This man who said more in 3 words than most people managed in paragraphs. Who had offered her partnership when he could have offered her a salary. Who looked at her work with the particular reverence of someone who understood exactly what they were looking at. She thought about Taeyong. About 8 years of standing beside someone who had her work in one hand and someone else's name on it in the other. She thought about how different it felt to sit across from someone who simply saw her. Clearly, accurately, and without agenda. Junho. He looked up. Thank you for the coffee that first morning. And for everything after it. You don't need to thank me, I'm the one who benefited. We both benefited, she said. Yes, he agreed. Something in his voice was different. Careful in a new way. We did. They looked at each other across the desk covered in documents that were about to change everything. Outside the window Seoul glittered, indifferent and beautiful. Inside the room something was building that had nothing to do with espionage or acquisition or the careful destruction of people who deserved it. Something quieter. More dangerous to both of them. Neither of them said it yet. They got back to work instead. The call from Taeyang came on a Thursday night 3 weeks into their investigation. Zara was alone in her hotel room reviewing documents when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. "My father knows you're still in Seoul," Taeyang said. No greeting. His voice was different from any version of it she'd heard before. Something underneath the usual smoothness. Something that might have been fear. "Zara, you need to listen to me. Whatever you think you've found, you need to stop." "What do you know about Clause 7C, Taeyang?" Zara asked. "You knew," she said. "I didn't know everything. I knew the partnerships had additional components. I didn't know the full scope. My father handled. You signed the agreements, your signature is on every one." "Zara." His voice broke. "My father is not someone you can fight. Whatever you're planning with Seo Junho, whatever you think you can do, you need to understand what you're going up against. These people have government protection. They have reach you can't imagine." "I have a pretty good imagination," Zara said. "This isn't a business dispute, this is not something you win by being the smartest person in the room. If my father decides you're a threat, he already decided that. He decided it 8 years ago when you brought me home and he realized he couldn't control me. The contract was just the most recent version of the same decision." "Zara, please. You have 2 choices, Taeyang. You can continue protecting your father and go down with him when this breaks. Or you can tell me everything you know and give yourself the only path out of this that doesn't end in a prison cell. Think about it, you have until Sunday." She ended the call. Her hands were not shaking. She noted that with a kind of quiet satisfaction. She texted Junho. Taeyang confirmed he knew. "He's scared. I gave him until Sunday to cooperate." The reply came in under a minute. "Smart. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we finish the evidence map. One more message. You're doing something remarkable. I hope you know that." Zara sat in her hotel room in the Seoul night and read that message 3 times. Then she put her phone down, closed her laptop, and for the first time in 3 weeks slept without dreaming of anything difficult. Sunday came. Taeyang called at 9 a.m. "I'll tell you everything," he said. His voice was hollowed out. Defeated in the particular way of someone who had spent 3 days fighting with themselves and lost. "But I want full cooperation with prosecutors. Complete immunity if possible. I'll have Junho's legal team draw up a proffer agreement today. Come to SJ Capital at 2 p.m. "Zara," he said before she could hang up. "What?" "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I am." Zara thought about the man she'd married. About the genuine parts of him that had existed alongside the weak ones. About the fact that love and disappointment could occupy the same space without cancelling each other out. "I know, 2 p.m., Taeyang." She hung up and called Junho. "He's coming in. I'll have the legal team ready." "Then, how are you?" "Ready," Zara said. "Yes, you are." Taeyang arrived at 2 p.m. and talked for 4 hours. He confirmed everything Zara had found and added layers she hadn't reached yet. Chairman Kwon's operation was more extensive than even her most thorough analysis had suggested. The data brokerage had clients on 3 continents. The government connection went higher than Deputy Minister Oh. There were financial flows connecting the operation to 2 sitting members of the Korean National Assembly. By the time Taeyang finished talking, the room was very quiet. Junho's lead attorney looked at her notes and then at Junho with an expression that said this was considerably beyond anything they had prepared for. We need to go to the National Intelligence Service, the attorney said. This is above criminal prosecution. This is a national security matter. Not the NIS directly. We have no way of knowing how deep the contamination goes in Korean intelligence. We go to the CIA Seoul station first. They'll want this and they have the leverage to force a clean Korean investigation. You have a contact at CIA Seoul, Zara said. Not a question. I have contacts everywhere, Junho replied. Zara looked at this man who had walked into her catastrophe and turned it into something she could use. Who had given her resources and partnership and the particular dignity of being taken seriously. Make the call, she said. That night after Taeyang had been taken to a secure location by Junho's security team and the attorneys had left and the documents were locked away, Zara and Junho sat alone in his office for the first time since the investigation had begun to feel like something close to finished. The city was dark outside the windows. Late enough that even Seoul had quieted slightly. Junho poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Set one in front of her. We're close, he said. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Are you ready for what comes after? He asked. Origin? Everything, he said. Zara turned her glass slowly on the desk. Thought about the question properly. I've been ready for 3 years, I just needed everything to stop pretending to be something it wasn't. Your marriage? My marriage. My company. My role in my own life. Sometimes the thing that destroys you is also the thing that finally forces you to be honest. What does honest look like for you now? He asked. It looks like this room, this work. This, she gestured between them, not quite finishing the sentence. I don't do this, I don't, he stopped. Started again. I built everything in my life on the principle that emotion is a liability. That clarity requires distance. And I have not felt distant from you since approximately the 2nd minute of our first meeting. Zara felt something warm and solid settle in her chest. That's very precise. I'm a precise person, he said. I know, I find it not unattractive. Something happened to his face. The neutrality didn't disappear exactly. It became something else. Something that was still controlled but had chosen what it was controlling toward rather than away from. He reached across the desk and put his hand over hers. Not a gesture of comfort. A declaration. Zara turned her hand over and held his. They sat like that in the quiet Seoul night with the city spread out below them and the work almost finished and the future beginning to take a shape that neither of them had planned for and both of them had been moving toward without admitting it. After this is over, Junho said. After this is over, Zara agreed. Outside the window Seoul glittered, indifferent and beautiful, completely unaware that a woman who had been sold on a Monday was about to buy it back. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell us where you are. Because we are almost at the ending and I promise you, it is worth every second you've stayed. Subscribe to Novatales TV. Right now. Let's finish this together. The CIA contact came through in 48 hours. His name was David Park, Korean-American, third-culture kid who had grown up between Seoul and Virginia and understood both worlds with the particular fluency of someone who belonged completely to neither. He arrived at SJ Capital on a Tuesday morning in a grey suit that was slightly too ordinary to be accidental, shook Zara's hand with the careful neutrality of someone trained to reveal nothing, and spent 3 hours reading everything they had assembled. When he finished he sat back and looked at Zara. How long did it take you to build this? He asked. 3 weeks with proper resources, Zara answered. 3 years of noticing things that didn't add up. David Park nodded. The Chinese buyers. Zhongwei. Do they know what they acquired? Some of it, Chairman Kwon sold them the infrastructure. Whether he sold them the full operational picture or kept that as personal leverage I'm not certain. Classic, build a machine, sell the machine, keep the keys. Can you move on this? Zara asked. We've been looking for a domestic entry point into Zhongwei's Korean operations for 18 months, you just handed us the entire architecture. He looked at her directly. Ms. Mensah, what you've done here is extraordinary. I want you to understand that. I want Chairman Kwon in a courtroom, that's what I want you to understand. We'll do our best. The agreement they reached over the following week was intricate and carefully balanced. The CIA would coordinate with Korean counterintelligence through a channel that bypassed the compromised officials they had identified. The evidence package would be delivered simultaneously to the Korean Independent Prosecutor's Office, 3 international intelligence agencies, and 2 major international news organizations whose investigative teams had been independently working adjacent stories for months and needed exactly the connective tissue Zara had provided. Zara would give a recorded testimony. On camera. Her face, her name, her voice. Junho had looked at her steadily when she told him that. Chairman Kwon will know immediately. Good, I want him to see me when it happens. I want the last thing he watches before they come for him to be the woman he thought he'd gotten rid of. I'll set up the camera, he said. She recorded for 90 minutes. Zara sat in front of a plain white wall in SJ Capital's media room, her natural hair out, no armor, no performance. Just herself. She wore a simple white shirt and looked directly into the lens and told the truth with the precision of someone who had spent a career making complicated things impossible to misunderstand. She described 8 years of building Nexus. The strategies, the pivots, the decisions that turned a failing startup into $3 billion of acquired value. She described the morning she watched her husband sell it on a hotel lobby television without telling her. She described the contract clause that tried to make her disappear. Then she described Clause 7C. She walked through every step of the data routing, every shell company, every financial flow, every connection between Chairman Kwon's parallel operation and the foreign buyers and the Korean government officials who had facilitated it. She was precise, calm, and devastating in the way that only someone who has done the work can be. She ended with one paragraph she hadn't planned. I want to speak directly to every woman who has ever built something and watched someone else take the credit. Every woman who has been told she is a term in someone else's agreement. Every woman who was sold when she should have been celebrated. She looked into the camera. They could not erase me. They could not silence me. They could not make me small enough to disappear. And neither can anyone who tries to erase you. Build anyway. Know your worth. And when they sell you, make sure they regret the price. When she finished, the room was completely silent. Junho, standing to the side, said nothing for a long time. That last paragraph goes everywhere. Make sure it does, Zara said. The release happened at 7 a.m. on a Friday. Zara and Junho sat side by side in his office watching the monitors as their carefully constructed earthquake detonated across Seoul from every direction simultaneously. 7:04 a.m. Reuters International. Korean tech giant Nexus linked to decade-long intelligence operation in bombshell CIA-backed investigation. 7:15 a.m. The Korean Independent Prosecutor's Office announced the opening of a criminal investigation into Chairman Kwon Dae-sung and 17 named associates. 7:30 a.m. Zhongwei Digital's acquisition of Nexus was suspended pending international review. Their stock dropped 30% before trading was halted. 7:45 a.m. Deputy Minister Oh Sang-woo was escorted from his office by counterintelligence officials while his assistant told journalists he was unavailable for comment. 8 a.m. Every major Korean news outlet ran Zara's testimony simultaneously. The woman who had been sold on a Monday looked out from every screen in Korea and told the truth. Junho's phone rang continuously. Zara's phone lit up with numbers she recognized and numbers she didn't. Messages from journalists, former colleagues, industry contacts who had watched her stand behind Taeyong for 8 years and were only now understanding what they had been looking at. She ignored everything except one call. Her mother. Grace Mensah, 63 years old, calling from Accra where it was still early morning. Zara, your father is here. We're watching together. Are you okay, Mama? Zara asked. I'm better than okay. I'm furious and proud, and I need you to know that I always knew. I always knew what you were worth. Even when you were giving it away to people who didn't deserve it. Zara felt something release in her chest. Something she hadn't known was still held tight. I know, Mama, I know. The arrests began at 9 a.m. Chairman Kwon Dae-sung was taken from his Seongbuk-dong residence in handcuffs. The footage was extraordinary. A man who had spent 40 years being untouchable, standing in the doorway of his own home with his hands behind his back, his face carrying the particular expression of someone who had never genuinely believed consequences applied to him and was learning otherwise in real time. His wife screamed at the cameras. His lawyers arrived within minutes and were immediately overwhelmed by the scale of the charges. 17 associates arrested across Seoul throughout the morning. Deputy Minister Oh taken from a hospital where he had apparently checked himself in overnight claiming chest pains. 2 National Assembly members escorted from the legislature building by counterintelligence officials in scenes that were filmed by every camera in the building and broadcast continuously. And Tae-young. Kwon Tae-young was arrested at the hotel where Junho's security team had been keeping him safe, his cooperation agreement already signed, his testimony already recorded. The arrest was procedural, his attorney present, everything managed quietly. But it happened. Because cooperation bought him a reduced sentence. It didn't buy him immunity from what he had signed his name to. Zara watched his arrest footage on Junho's monitor. She felt something complicated. Not satisfaction exactly. Not grief either. Something in between. The particular feeling of watching a story end that you had wanted to end differently and couldn't. Are you all right? Junho asked beside her. Yes, I don't hate him. She paused. I needed him to be accountable. For his own sake as much as anything. That's more grace than he deserves. Probably, Zara agreed. But it's what I have. Junho looked at her with the expression that had been becoming more frequent. The one that lived beneath the neutrality and had stopped pretending not to exist. Origin, the filing went through this morning. We're officially incorporated. While all of this was happening, I had my team handle it last night. I wanted it to exist before the arrests. I wanted Origin to be real before Nexus collapsed. So there would be no gap. So you would have something to step into instead of something to step away from. Zara looked at him. This man. This precise, controlled, quietly remarkable man who thought in systems the same way she did. Who had anticipated what she needed before she had named it. Who had looked at her work 3 years ago from a distance and understood its true value when the person she'd built it beside never had. Junho, she called. Yes, he answered. Like he already knew what she was going to say and had already decided his answer. She reached across and took his hand the way he had taken hers weeks ago in the quiet of this office, deliberate and declaration. He looked down at their joined hands. Then up at her. After this settles, he said. After this settles, she agreed. But I want you to know now. So there's no ambiguity. There has been no ambiguity since the second minute of our first meeting. You and your precise timekeeping, Zara said. You and your extraordinary mind, he replied. Outside the window Seoul was erupting. News vans, press conferences, the visible machinery of a city processing the collapse of something powerful. Inside the office it was quiet. Just 2 people holding hands over a desk covered in the evidence of a fight they had won together. Let's build something, Zara said. We already are, Junho replied. 6 months later Origin launched. Not quietly. Not tentatively. With the particular confidence of something that had been planned for 3 years by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The launch event was held at a converted hangar in Mapo district, all exposed concrete and dramatic lighting, Seoul's tech elite packed into every corner. Zara stood on the stage in a white suit that had been made for her by a Ghanaian-Korean designer who had reached out after watching her testimony, looking out at a room full of people who had watched her stand behind Tae-young for 8 years and were now understanding they had been looking at the wrong person. Junho stood to the side of the stage. Not on it. That had been his choice, made without discussion, because he understood instinctively that this moment belonged entirely to her. She presented Origin's architecture for 45 minutes. The AI infrastructure model that made everything Nexus had built look like a prototype. The international partnership structure that was clean and transparent and built on a data ethics framework she had written herself. The vision for what Korean tech could be when it was built on honesty instead of theft. The room was completely silent throughout. When she finished, the applause was the kind that starts slowly because people need a moment to process what they've witnessed. Afterwards, standing in the crowd with a glass of champagne she wasn't drinking, a journalist from Korea's largest tech publication found her. "Ms. Mensah, you built Nexus. Now you've built Origin. What do you want people to understand about what happened in between?" Zara considered the question. "I want people to understand that being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you believe it. Every person who dismissed me, every room that looked past me, every signature on a contract designed to make me disappear, all of it just gave me time to build something they couldn't see coming. The people who sold me thought they were getting rid of a problem. They were actually just getting out of my way." The journalist wrote it down. It was the headline the next morning in 17 publications across 4 countries. 3 months after Origin's launch, Chairman Kwon Dae-sung was sentenced to 27 years in Seongbuk prison. The judge cited the extraordinary scope of the operation, its threat to national security, and its decade-long corruption of public institutions. Deputy Minister Oh received 20 years. The 2 National Assembly members received 16 and 14 years respectively. 17 associates received sentences ranging from 8 to 20 years. Dongwei Digital's acquisition of Nexus was annulled by international court order. Nexus, stripped of its leadership, its reputation, and the invisible architecture that had made it work, collapsed within 60 days. Its assets were seized. Its name ceased to exist. Tae-young received 4 years, reduced to 2 with cooperation credit. He served his time quietly, gave no interviews, and emerged into a world in which his name meant nothing in the industry he had spent his life inhabiting. Zara did not attend any of the sentencing hearings. She was busy. On a Saturday morning in March, 8 months after the investigation broke, Zara walked through Bukhan Hanok village with her hands in her coat pockets and her face turned up to the cold spring light. She came here sometimes. Not because it meant anything specific, but because it was beautiful and old and had survived everything Seoul had thrown at it, wars, development, time itself, and was still standing, still exactly what it had always been. People recognized her. They did everywhere now. Some stopped to speak. Some simply smiled. One young woman, university age, stopped her on the path and said in careful English, "I watched your testimony. I'm studying computer science because of you." Zara held that for a moment. "Good, build something that's yours. From the beginning. Don't let anyone else put their name on it." The young woman nodded like she was memorizing it. "Where are you?" Not accusatory. Just wanting to know. She had learned that about him. He always wanted to know where she was, not to control it, but because he was someone who paid attention to what mattered to him and she mattered to him, and he saw no reason to pretend otherwise. "Bukhan," she said. "Come find me." 10 minutes, he said. It was 7. He appeared at the top of the hill path with his hands in his coat pockets and his hair slightly less controlled than usual from the walk up, and his eyes finding her across the distance with the immediate focus warmth that he no longer bothered to contain. He walked to her. They stood together looking out over Seoul. The city that had tried to erase her. The city that was currently printing her name on its future in ways she was only beginning to understand. The city that would always be complicated and hers. Time magazine called again. Junho said, "I know, I'll call them back Monday. The most influential people in Asian tech issue, cover. I know, it's strange. I spent 8 years trying to be visible in rooms where I was invisible. Now I can't walk through Bukhan without being recognized. How does it feel?" Junho asked. "Like accuracy, like the world finally has the right information." Junho nodded like that was exactly the right answer. He reached over and tucked a strand of her hair back from her face. A gesture so gentle and so at odds with every public version of him that it would have shocked anyone watching. He had a whole private vocabulary of gestures like that. She was still learning them. She suspected she would be learning them for a very long time and found she had no objection to that. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his coat pocket and produced an envelope. She opened it. Inside was a single document. A deed. The deed to the building that had housed Nexus headquarters. Purchased at auction after the collapse. Now registered in the name of Origin Technologies. Zara stared at it. "You bought their building. Origin needed a permanent home, and I thought there was a certain poetry in the address. At the address where she had spent 8 years building something in someone else's name. That would now permanently bear hers." She laughed. Junho watched her laugh with the expression he had when he thought she wasn't looking. The one that had nothing to do with precision or control or the careful management of exposure. The one that was just a man looking at someone he loved and being entirely at peace with it. "You're ridiculous," she told him. "I'm precise," he corrected. "Precisely ridiculous. I'll accept that." She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. They stood like that over the city in the cold March light, the deed to her future in her hand, the past exactly where it belonged, which was behind her, which was done, which was over. "What's next?" Junho asked. "Everything," she said. He pulled her slightly closer. "Everything," he agreed. She was sold on a Monday. And in the end the woman they sold bought back everything they thought they'd taken. At a price they could never afford.